Okay, welcome to Universal God, Message of Peace. And I'm Lee Weissman. I almost forgot for a second there. And this is Lale Tuncer, and we are um, talking today about fire and water, going through fire and water, all the tough stuff in the world. So I'm going to start out with a little teaching, just to get us kicked off. Um, so there's a statement, there's a Mishnah, one of the statements of the rabbis from the first century, that says that all arguments that are for the sake of heaven, which are l'shem shamayim, okay, in the name of heaven, will endure. To say that arguments which are conducted for the sake of peace, for the sake of truth, those things will endure because they will eventually come to truth, right? So we can have arguments, we can have discussions and so on that can lead us to truth, even if they're disagreements. But one of the rabbis, his name, they call him the Kli Yakar. How he is referred to, which means literally the precious vessel. And he asks a question. He says, why is it called L'Shem Shamayim? Why is it called the why is it called for the sake of heaven? Why for the sake of heaven? And he said, because the word heaven, Shamayim, okay, comes from two words, Aish and Mayim, fire and water. And says that the heavens, metaphorically, right, is a union of fire and water, two very, very different things that nevertheless manage to coexist. And so a dispute, okay, that can make fire and water live together, that's something which can endure and which brings lasting peace. So even things as different as fire and water can live together. But fire and water are both purifying things, right? We can purify things with water and we can purify things with fire, right? If we take a dirty cup and we immerse it in water and we swish it around a little bit, then we clean it up and it gets all beautiful and bright and nice, right? On the contrary, right? If we take a vessel, if we take a little bit of gold, okay, that's an easy example of gold. We take a little bit of gold and we put it into a little crucible and we heat it up. And we heat it up with fire. The dross, all the impurities are going to rise to the top. We can skim them off, and it's going to create this beautiful, perfect, pure gold. So both water and fire can purify us. One is a more painful process, right? To be purified by fire is much more difficult. Is much more difficult. And so I think when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about, how do we deal with the things in our life that may not be so easy? Because water can also not be easy, right? We can sometimes feel like we're drowning, right? We can sometimes feel like, and King David talks about this in the Psalms, right? This feeling of being drowning, like the water is up to your nose, the water is up to your nose, and and it rises just a little bit further, you're not going to be able to, like you're walking into the pool, right? You're walking into the pool and you get to the point, right, where your tippy toes are no longer good enough anymore, and you're going to have to get under the water. A lot of us feel that way a lot. And fire, right? There's times when we feel uh, uh, like we're being purified, and we have to face very, very difficult things. So I thought we would talk about like how do we deal with that? And I have no brilliant answers to this. Um, Maybe Lale is going to have brilliant answers to this. I'm not sure there are brilliant answers to this. So today it's like two people trying to figure stuff out, I think. So
Yes.
so let's figure it out.
Let's try to figure it out. So, yeah, it's a huge topic and um, fascinating topic. Anything to do with opposites, I find really fascinating.
Mhm.
Um, and how to make peace between the opposites. I guess the duality of this world where everything is, seems like there's this and that. How do we make peace between water and fire? You mentioned in the heavens, they're like together, but how
Mhm.
do we do that here on Earth? Because if you put water onto fire, what happens? It
Yeah,
does.
well,
How can water and fire have a relationship together in peace? Rabbi Weissman, back over to you.
you make soup. That's
Yes, I was thinking that too.
you
That
make you make soup. If no, no, I think it's the Kabbalists refer to this world to this world that we live in as the Olam HaPerud, the world of separation, right? The world of separation. Here, everything exists in opposites, right? Everything exists all the way down to the atomic level, right? Even, everything exists in opposites, electrons, right? In their orbits and things like that. We live in a world of opposites. We live in a world of multiplicity, and we dream of a world of unity. But in that world of multiplicity that we live in, we're going to face obstacles. I think one of the things is not to be afraid of them. It's not to be afraid of them, to understand that they have their uses. You know, water can be dangerous, right? Fire can be dangerous. Both can be deadly. And yet they're also very useful, and they're also very purifying. We also use them to transform the world and to change things. So we have to recognize that the obstacles that we encounter are not there to destroy us necessarily, right? They're there to help us to grow and to help us. And so when we have those, when we face the fire, for me, fire, I think, for example, of facing someone else's anger. Okay. To me, that feels like a fiery situation. Okay. And I am extremely tested in those situations, right? When I'm up against somebody's real anger, I am very, very tested because I have my own emotions to deal with. I have my own anger to deal with. I have my own shame to deal with. I have all these things going on inside me. And it's like flames coming against me. And I have to remind myself, okay, this is like an opportunity. Okay, this is a chance for me to be purified. I This is a chance for me to burn off some of the bad stuff inside me.
It's a really
And
good.
yeah,
And I think we do, it is a purification process, isn't it? Because we can, maybe perhaps water is sort of symbolic of kindness, and and perhaps fire could be symbolic of, harshness, or, anger or fury, vengeance, that type of thing. And um both can be purifying. So I guess love and kindness can purify us,
yeah,
and so can anger, so can vengeance or retribution or justice, punishment, if you like, or whatever you want to call it, but like a purification process. And in this world, perhaps the human being has the ability to use both of these elements in order to get the right balance, in order to connect heaven, or make this earth like a place in heaven. And I want to know, where does earth and air come into it? Because I think of, like, I imagine like a fire. If you put water on the fire, it will extinguish the fire. But if you put the water in a clay pot and put that on the fire,
mhm,
and you've got the air as well coming in, and
yeah.
then it's heating up the fire, and then it heats up the water, and then you've got like
Then
hot
you have
water.
soup.
Then you've got yeah, and you can put in like all the different spices, and you can all sit round together and eat together.
Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe that's what we can do. Maybe that will make the peace if we all have soup together. Yes.
yeah. A little bit of grounding, I think, a little bit of grounding can help a lot. I think the water purification is much more. I mean, there are much more gentle ways of, you know, I'd much rather be accused of washing over somebody than 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 flame throwing them. Um, it I,
But
I think it's much more. I think the purification by water is much more much more gentle, except for that feeling of drowning. Like being that feeling of being overwhelmed. I mean, I also associate that with water. Just like feeling like you just have just too much. Um, and that's a very difficult feeling to get around sometimes. It's a tough one. You have to learn to swim. That's you
you
know,
have to swim, and water is not always a good thing, is it? Because it can get boiling hot water, which if you
yes.
pour the soup all over you, which did happen to me when I was a baby, um,
Oh,
it's not pleasant.
yeah.
Um, so I have a question. My question is, what's my question again? Oh, so the lake of fire. What do you understand by the lake of fire?
Well, but I don't think we have a lake of fire. I think in Judaism we don't have a lake of fire. The way I understand it is like that's 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 the ultimate purification, right? If you're coming out of this world with if you're coming out of this world with all of these impurities, right, that you've been creating in yourself, and that becomes a description of how it is that gets purified. you know I mean, there's no, how would you describe, right, if you're trying to describe the process of purifying somebody after a lifetime of sin? Well, that's a pretty good, you know and the lake of fire is because you can immerse yourself in it, right? The lake is some place where you can go and you can immerse yourself in it. So it's kind of a combination of both, right? The lake is the place where you could purify yourself, where you could immerse yourself, baptism, going to the mikveh, ghusl, right? All of that, all that imagery of ablution, right? Except in fire. There are people, even it's interesting in India, there are people who bathe in hot coals. They'll, go walk in hot coals and throw them over themselves to bathe in the hot coals in order to get rid of their, to sort of symbolically get rid of their sins. Um, I don't recommend that, by the way. That's
No, it sounds, it
bad.
sounds,
Yeah, you don't do that at home, please.
no, please don't. Um, so is water to sort of purify our body and fire to purify our soul, would you say? Or can you purify the spirit with the soul with the water as well?
Well, I think I don't know, my experience. So I used to go to the mikveh every day. I used to go bathe every day back when I lived close to a mikveh, and I worked close to a mikveh. I used to go every day. And I felt like I was like being reborn every day. There's also that kind of feeling of rebirth that comes, right? When you immerse yourself in water and for a moment you can't breathe, right? It's almost like you're dying in a way, right? And then you come up from the water and you're like a new person. So I think it's purifying for your body, but I think it's also purifying for your soul. But there's something different about suffering. I mean, when I looked at, you know, I used to read a lot of biographies. I went through a period like I was obsessed with biographies. And the one thing I noticed is that an inordinate number of great people spent time in jail, right? An inordinate number of great people had great suffering. And their greatness was directly related to their suffering, almost always. Almost always. Um, and so that kind of trial by fire, I think, has a power of changing character and personality in a way that nothing else does. So you never want to say to somebody, you should suffer, right?
Mhm.
I would never wish suffering on anybody, um, or myself for that matter, and certainly not on you. But still, the suffering, I think it can transform us in amazing ways. I think it does, and I think it does burn off the dross, right? It does bring out the best in people somehow. You
Mhm.
know, there's something that kind of rises to the top, um, in people when they experience that kind of fire of suffering. And better to do it in this world than in the next world, right? I think that's partially the message of the lake of fire, right? Better to have the fire in this world and to be able to learn from it and to be able to grow from it and purify yourself here in this world than to have to experience it in the future.
Yeah, definitely. That's really, really well said. I think water is sort of like I see water like a mercy, like a compassionate sort of, if if you're burning, you want somebody to throw cold water on you.
Mhm.
Um, and actually, perhaps one way that we can protect ourselves from experiencing the fire too much is by showing mercy to other people and, you know, giving a cool water, bit of a cup, nice cool cup of water to drink for our fellow human being, and reach out our hand and help them and throw water on others, as an act of mercy. Because maybe then as well, and we shouldn't do it for that reason, but I think if fire is sort of symbolic of, I get in Gevura, is it in
Mhm.
Hebrew?
Right?
Uh, yes. And in the Quran, it says about the hellfire, and over it will be angels who are very harsh.
Mhm.
And, people will be, asking, throw water on us, or give us a cool drink, or help us get out of here. But they will be strict. They will have no compassion. They will have no mercy. And I believe that, the more mercy we show others in this world, the same mercy we will get back, because that is justice. That is justice, and God is just. So it's a really frightening concept, really. I think there's many layers of scripture, isn't there? And obviously we imagine the physical, burning of skins and all of this type of thing when we think of a fire. But I think it's a spiritual thing as well. And the emotions of despair, anguish, anxiety. You get anxiety and reflux and burning inside your stomach and that type of thing. Um, it and hopelessness, and feelings of impending doom and darkness, and all of these concepts. I think I associate with like a spiritual fire,
Yeah.
and and actually we can experience that hell in this world as well. Um, So let's take that moment, let's utilize that, let's use it as an opportunity to learn from it, and then not do to others what we don't like to be done to us. So obviously, if we experience those emotions because of the actions of somebody else onto us, then perhaps that's teaching us not to do that to somebody else.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, um, that's how I.
If you ever have been in a really, really hot place, it's 95 degrees outside right now. I don't know what that is in Celsius.
The desert was very hot last year, and
It's a really, really, really hot right now. It's super, super hot. And and if you go out on a day like today and you're just sweating and somebody walks up to you and hands you a nice cold bottle of water, okay?
yes.
There's nothing like
Mhm.
it's it's like heaven, it's like heaven on earth, you know. Um uh
It's true,
you
it's
know,
true.
and I think that we can be that for other people. We could be, sometimes we see people, and we see people when we see that they're going through the fire. right? Then we can be water for their fire. You know, we can be that, you know, that chesed to their gevura. We can be the sweetness, right, to the bitterness, and we can and it doesn't necessarily take much. You know, it can be a smile, it can be a kind word, it can be a pat on the shoulder, it can be a nice cold glass of water, it could be a nice hot cup of
Yeah,
coffee.
yeah, it doesn't
Uh,
have to
it
be
could
awesome.
be any of those things, you know, any of those things, you know, can help when we see somebody else who's going through that. Um, and at the same time, you know, we can also, you know, when we see people when we see people who are drowning, right, we can help them, you know. We can also help pull them out of the water, you know. I think that's I often see people in that experience, you know, it's people just like they're completely overwhelmed. And sometimes just having somebody, you know, sit at the shore, you know, having somebody sit at the edge of the pool, so to speak, and say, you know, I'm here, you know, is enough, you know, and just have somebody's hand to hold on to is enough. And we can do that for people. You say, you know, I can see that you've got a lot going on. I see you have a lot going on, and just, you know, so you know, I'm here. Here's my hand. You know, when you need it, just, you know, grab on. And
Well, that's really beautiful. You're right. Maybe the water is also sort of could be symbolic of all the physicality of this world. Like every living being is made of water. Is it 75% of water? The earth is, is water everywhere
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
this physical world. And maybe if we're too into the physical, we can sometimes get a bit overwhelmed and feel like we're drowning in it. And perhaps then we should look inside and look for that fire within, look for the light of God within us and connect more to that and actually be more spiritual, perhaps, and look after our spirituality and keep that fire burning. You have to keep it burning. And it will obviously it keeps burning, but if we connected to that, the fire of God inside, it's not necessarily a bad fire. It's just too painful, because obviously, like, I think that the more spiritually strong we are, the more we can handle the fire. So Abraham, it reminds me of Abraham, peace be upon him, and he was thrown into the fire,
Hmm.
and God says to him, God says to the fire, or we say to the fire, be cool for Abraham. So, and he's not harmed by the fire. And if we think of fire, it's not necessarily always a negative thing. And you know, Moses was spoken to by God directly through the burning bush. Um, so God was in that fire, and it is the fire of God. It's not separate from God.
Right.
Hellfire is not something separate from God. It's, my understanding is that it's, God's
Yeah.
um
The fire of listen, the
the
fire of
fire creator.
passion, you know,
Yeah.
the fire, you know, when people, you know, sometimes nowadays, you know, the, I don't know which, I'm not sure, I can't keep track anymore. Like what generation is, you know, Generation Z, Generation X, Generation Y, I'm not sure which generation we're in. But like when something is good, they say fire. It's fire, right? That's fire, right? I mean, that's something that shows a lot of passion, something which shows a lot of excitement, and
Exactly.
that's an important part of life, you know. But Rabbi Nachman makes a very nice thing. He says when it comes to your inner fire, he says try to be more light than heat. You know, try to be more light than heat. You know, there's a part of us that's heat, and that part can sometimes be dangerous, right? But the part of us that's light, that's beautiful. So, you know, we should have that inner. It's in Yiddishized he's with Hislavus, it's called, right? Hitlavut, right? To be on fire for something is a great thing, right? To have a passion for something, you know, is is an important part of life. We have to have that. We have to have that passion, right? But it should spread lots of light, you know. And so we can even take, I think, even that kind of negative fire of suffering, I think, can be transformed into fashion. That's the thing. Like anything that is negative could always be like, that's the alchemy. It can always be transformed into something, into something good. And so if you have that, you shouldn't be afraid of it. Oh, I have passion, oh, get terrified. Don't get scared. Don't get scared of the fact that you're a passionate person. If you're a passionate person, it's good, right? Just but learn to take it and put it in the right directions.
Yes. Amen. May God help us to not be
Amen.
afraid of fire, not be afraid of the water. Let's go into the ocean on our little boat and not be afraid and walk through fire. No, we have to take precaution, obviously, and
Yeah, take caution walking through the fire. Take caution when you're swimming, but know that every person in their life has to face the fire and has to face the water, and that we can be purified and that we can grow, and and sometimes we can even make soup out of it. So uh, and so wish everybody a beautiful week and happiness and peace, and your fire and water should be in perfect harmony, and your passions and your floods and everything should be in perfect order.
Amen. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.
So,